designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to a special episode of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I am your gracious host, Kyle Malnati. Our expert guest today is Nicole Kim. Nicole is with the City and County of Denver, specifically with the Department of Excise and Licenses. Nicole's role is a little bit of a tongue twister, but I'll try it here. Residential Rental Property License Program Manager. And what that means to you is she's going to talk about the most recent landlord licensing law that went into effect, landlord licensing program that went into effect. Nicole was gracious to present to an intimate group of clients of both myself and Sam Bretz with Calibrate Real Estate. We also had some folks from an inspection company. Nicole, welcome to our show. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, and as you know, we've done this once before. We did it a week ago, had some technical difficulties where we got some of the audio, but not all of it. And so thanks so much for being willing to present to our podcast audience, which actually goes out to a much broader group of people than what we had in the room. But we had a vivacious crowd, people that were avid learners, kind of edge of their seat. And this will be a conversation between you and myself as we go through your slide deck here. And let's just give, as you're pulling up that slide deck, just a brief context on where we got to with the City and County of Denver with this landlord licensing situation and how you intersected in as being the program manager.
Sure. Yeah. Again, thanks for having me. Happy to share information about the license program. So again, I am with the Denver Department of Excise and Licenses, and I am the program manager for this program. This was a council-initiated ordinance that passed in May of 2021. So that's when it became ordinance or law for us. And the Department of Excise and Licenses is responsible for the implementation and operationalization of this license. And so that's kind of where we're at today. Is the license is in place, the requirements are in place. There's some phasing that I'll touch on in the presentation here. And so just planning to give you an overview of both the license and some background there, and then also the requirements, as well as touch on the application and our online system.
Fantastic. And for those of you that are not watching on YouTube, the slides will be presented here in the video content, but Nicole and I are going to have an active conversation as she goes through it. So you really don't need to see the slides, but if you choose that you want to go check out YouTube, we'll make sure to have that in our program notes here. So without further ado, Nicole Kim presenting on the Residential Rental License Program overview. This is specific to the Mile High City, the City and County of Denver. And here we go.
Okay, away we go. Thank you so much. So again, residential rental property, just basically a definition or really clear what that means. Residential rental property is any building structure or accessory dwelling unit that's rented or offered for rent as a residence for 30 days or more. So short-term rentals, meaning anything 29 days or less offered for rent. Short-term rentals are covered under a separate license program, also administered through Denver Excise and Licenses. So that would be like your VRBO or Airbnb type of licenses. So residential rental property is more like apartments that would be for lease, or if you have a home that you don't live in and you rent that out to a long-term tenant. We're estimating that about 54,000 properties in Denver are going to need to be licensed. Again, there's some timing pieces that I'll cover on that. This license program partners with the existing Denver Department of Public Health and Environment complaint-based program related to housing code and regulation enforcement. So Denver Public Health and Environment has a complaint-based program where tenants or residents of rental units can make complaints related to housing violations or issues, and those will be followed up on by Denver Public Health and Environment. So this license is just a proactive program to ensure compliance with those housing codes and regulations. So there was an advisory group conducted by Councilwoman Gilmore that looked at all of the DDPHE codes and regulations, and this program took those recommendations from that advisory group and considered those when implementing the program and the requirements. So again, just to stress that the DDPHE complaint-based program still exists, and this program is kind of a partner with that. So again, this was a council-initiated ordinance. At the time, Council President Stacey Gilmore was the champion of this, passed in May of 2021. Goals of the program. So first goal is to ensure minimum housing standards for all rental units. This ensures the welfare, safety, and health for those residing in them. So we can all agree that's a good thing for Denver residents. We also want to accurately track city housing stock and rentals, including the types of rentals and where they are. Prior to this license program, there was no information about that. So information helps us to make good decisions, both within, the city and agencies that make decisions for our residents and owners. So this will help build that database. We also want to be able to collect and utilize contact information so that we can share city resources with rental property owners and tenants, and also to help strengthen landlord and tenant education and make sure that we're able to conduct outreach, when needed. This was one thing that, especially during like the COVID pandemic, we realized that that wasn't really something that we had. And so it was difficult to share information and make sure that people had access to, information and resources that they might need. So these are some of the goals of the program, again, that kind of was developed by council and ordinance and now is being implemented by excise and licenses. So some important dates to keep in mind. The program is being phased in. So as of January 1 of 2022, landlords must provide a written lease and a copy of the Denver Tenant Rights and Resources documents to all tenants. So if you previously weren't providing a written lease, that is required now. And then you also have to provide this Denver Tenant Rights and Resources document. The name is pretty self-explanatory as to what that covers and includes. That document does have to be provided at the time that a written lease is signed, and also anytime that there's a rent demand made on the property. And then as far as the license requirements and when you have to apply. So as of January 1, 2023, all multi-unit properties need to have applied for a license. I'll touch on the specifics of what a multi-unit property means in just a minute here. And then by January 1 of 2024, all single unit properties will need to have applied for a license.
And Nicole, if I can interject real quick, that was probably the biggest aha that we had last week during our event, was that I had multiple clients that were sitting there saying, wait a second, I'm already out of compliance. I think there was a lot of confusion, and not on the part of the city and county of Denver necessarily, but just with the idea that I think some people thought that last year was optional, this year was mandatory, and just didn't quite understand that it was mandatory as of January 1st. So this is just another reminder. If you haven't done it, obviously get into the program, and we'll work through what that looks like here in a few minutes.
Yep, that's correct. So it is as of January 1, and then by January 1 of 2024 for those single unit properties. And again, I'll spend a little bit more time on that in just a second here, but thanks for that great call out there. So related to the property, inspections by a qualified inspector are required for the license application. I'll get into those qualifications in just a second here. Single unit properties require an individual license. So a single unit property could be like your single family home that you rent out. It could be one unit of a duplex, or it could be one condo in a condo building. For multi-unit properties, we can issue a single license for those multiple units if they're all located on one parcel or contiguous parcels, meaning touching or next to each other, and under the same ownership. So you really have to know the ownership and then also kind of the property configuration there. Additional addresses must be documented on the inspection checklist and application. So if you do have any multi-unit properties that you're going to be applying for, just make sure that when the inspector checklist is completed and you're filling out that application, you really understand what those things mean, and that you double check those documents and applications. So again, the inspector qualifications. This is really important because again, we only accept inspections from a qualified inspector. So they have to have 2 certifications. One of those is a home inspector certification, and it has to be by one of these 3 agencies. So American Society of Home Inspectors, International Association of Certified Home Inspectors, or the Master Inspector Certification Board. So they have to have one of those. And then they also have to be certified as a combination building inspector by the International Code Council. So we refer to that as the ICC. And so there are 3 certifications that they could have that would meet that, which is the R5, C5, or C8. So it's basically a residential combination inspector or a commercial combination inspector. So you do have to have those 2 certifications in order to be considered qualified to do the RRP inspections. So again, inspections must be completed by these third-party private inspectors who have those qualifications. If you have a multi-unit property, the inspections must be completed on 10% of the total number of units, or a minimum of 1 if less than 10. The units must be randomly selected by the inspector using a random number generator. So make sure that when you have that communication with the inspector to get your inspection scheduled, you let them know all of the units that you have. They'll randomly select those 10%, and then you can coordinate, with your tenants to get those scheduled, or have the inspector do it, or whatever the arrangement is there. But it does have to be 10% of the total, or 1 if less than 10, and randomly selected. All checklist items do apply. So we have an inspection checklist. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. It does include some common area and shared utility items. And so owners and managers are advised to plan ahead and understand the requirements. We do have, in addition to the checklist, a checklist guidebook, which has additional information about all of the violations and then how to apply some of the inspection requirements, especially related to some of the common areas and shared utilities. So for example, like if you have a boiler room at your property, there's a process outlined for that and how the inspectors can verify compliance with that without having to do it on every single unit and things like that. So we do advise you to kind of plan ahead, understand the requirements, look at the checklist and the guidebook when you're getting ready to conduct your inspections.
Nicole, I might interject for just a second and share that there are lots of inspectors that are certified for this program. We happen to have our event with this particular inspection company, which I'm happy to provide to people offline. Nicole and the city and county of Denver can't specifically say this one inspector is endorsed, but there are several that are certified. The other thing I would share too is that I actually became the most familiar with this whole process by having a buyer require that the seller start to initiate this process and actually create some contract language in our purchase and sale agreement last fall, where the buyer said we need to have this be a contingency in our contract. And what I found was that the inspection was very straightforward. It was very somewhat simple, and it didn't take a long time. So I think for those that are apprehensive about doing the inspection for the sake that it may bother their tenants or take a long time or be very punitive, I found it to be none of those things.
Great, thank you for that added context there. So yes, I'll just touch on that if I haven't stressed that already, or if I don't in the upcoming slides here. So we do have an inspector registry list on our webpage, and that has inspectors who have self-reported that they meet the qualifications for the program. We do still advise you to verify those certifications and qualifications before you contract with them. And then I will say the inspection checklist, like you just mentioned, is based on the residential health code that I mentioned earlier. So there's 25 items right now. We've had a few modifications, a few minor modifications to that, but I think it's about 25 items now. And like I mentioned, the inspection checklist guidebook provides additional information. So really want to stress that those documents are available on our webpage. The inspectors and the property owners or managers should be looking at those same documents. So 100% transparency, you can be prepared for what they're looking at. And when they come, out on site, you both should have no surprises as far as what one another is looking for, and what is going to be kind of checked off for compliance there. So thanks again, Kyle, for the tips about getting those inspections, and the fact that it's pretty clear that the checklist is available and you should be looking at that. One other thing just to touch on here is that in addition to the checklist, properties must comply with all existing codes and laws. So the license doesn't supersede any other codes, such as things like zoning, fire, and building codes. So you do have to be in compliance with those, regardless of this license program. So re-inspections, just want to touch on this. So we recognize that there could be situations where there's going to be something marked non-compliant on a first inspection. Checklist items can be addressed during an inspection. So say, for example, you have batteries that are, not working in your smoke detector. Those can be replaced on inspection, and the inspector can just note that on the form. Non-compliant items that are noted on the checklist should be re-inspected once corrections have been made. We have page on the inspection checklist document that is specifically for this. And then also we have a process in the guidebook for how that works and kind of, what you might want to take into consideration when you're doing that. A couple of things to call out on time frames here. So once you have your initial inspection, you do have to make sure that your application is submitted within 90 days of that original inspection. So whether you're going to have a re-inspection or not, make sure that once you have that inspection, you get the application submitted. And then any re-inspections just must be submitted within 1 year of the application. So go ahead and get your application in, and then you can take care of any re-inspections and submit those within 1 year. So that was an update at the end of 2022. Just want to call that out and let people know you do have a little bit more time for that now. So that's the timelines there to keep in mind related to re-inspections. A little bit more on inspections here. So costs are set by the inspectors or the inspection companies. So city has no jurisdiction over these third-party private inspectors related to costs. You contract with them and do all that scheduling with them. Again, property owners and managers should utilize the inspector list that I mentioned is on our website of those self-reporting inspectors who meet the qualifications. And we do require that the inspectors remain current on their certification. So in the application, you'll be required to provide not only a copy of that certification, but you'll also have to enter the expiration dates for those certifications. So if they're expired, they won't be accepted. So just make sure that you check on those things when you do contract with those inspectors. And so now related to the application. So we do have some application resources that are available to customers. So firstly, the application is online through Denver's online permitting and licensing center. So if you've ever applied for like a building permit or another license, it's going to be in the same place there. You basically set up your account with your email and your password, and then all of your permits and licenses will be housed there. So you can always go back to those. They'll give you the action steps and things like that. You can, delegate someone if you want someone to act on behalf of your license and things like that. We do have our residential rental property application page that outlines all the information that's going to be required. So it is a step-by-step as far as, step one, look at, the ordinance and make sure this is for you. Step two, make sure that you understand the inspection or exemption requirements that might be out there. Step three, gather all your documents. They are XYZ. So that's a really helpful page and kind of walks through everything that you're going to need to get prepared for before you actually log in and start submitting. We also do have a step-by-step video, which is available. It walks you through click by click. This is how the screen should look, and this is what we're asking you here if you don't know. I also do like to just kind of call out that on the actual application, we do provide information as far as what we're asking. So if you're confused about what the terminology might be or what exactly we're asking for in a particular question, just read through the application page. We've tried to provide as much information as possible. You also can always contact licenses@denvergov.org or call 311. If you're outside of Denver, it's 720-913-1311. All of our questions do go to 311. A lot of times the question can be answered directly by one of our call center agents, or those will get kind of queued up for us. And then, myself or someone from my team or from, our agency can get back to you. So that's the best way to contact us. And then we do have virtual and in-person appointments, which are available for assistance. So you can schedule those through our webpage. And that way, if you're having any, trouble with the application, or you just have questions about what something means, you need help scanning or uploading your documents, any of those things, we can help you out with that. You also can get walk-in assistance at our excise and license offices at the Web Building, which is at 201 West Colfax. You can do that anytime during business hours, and someone will help you. And again, you can just,
Nicole,
if you have questions or
I
applications.
will share that one of the people in our audience last week had suggested that second step of this whole process for them was looking at the step-by-step videos. The first was sort of clunking around on the website And I think they said something to the effect of the first application for multiple buildings that they had took an hour. And then once they did that step-by-step video, I think that it condensed down to like 15 or 20 minutes to actually get their application done. So that's a valuable resource. And obviously a lot of people do learning by video application, things like YouTube and others. So I think it's great that the city and county of Denver has a great step-by-step video available. And we'll make sure that that's part of the show notes as well.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, I wish I could take credit for the video, but I can't. But it is fantastic. I think it's about 40 minutes in total. But of course, you can always like pause or fast forward or rewind if you're like, I know they said something about that. I better get back to the place in the video where they mentioned that. So it is really a great resource. And again, it gives you kind of that click by click. They walk through one particular example, I think, an LLC ownership or something like that. But the video is applicable to all of the application types. You might just need to kind of tailor your application based on your ownership and number of units and things like that. But it's a great resource. Similarly, the appointments, we've really had, I think, great success with those, and we're available. So, just let us know what you need, and we're trying to make sure we're there if you need help. Again, the application, so it's in our online permit and license center. You will need an account with a login and a password. That can just be your email, or your client's email or something like that. If you forget your password, we do have the reset password link, or if you forget and you still can't get to that, just contact us. We'll reset it for you or get you straightened out there. The application is under the business, occupational, short-term, and residential rental licensing section. So you'll kind of see it right there. You'll just click on apply new. Related to the application, so each property you're going to apply new, the owner is going to be the license holder. If you are someone who is applying on behalf of the owner, you're going to use their info, and you can be the optional email recipient. So there's a specific question where you can, put your email address in, say if you're the property manager, or just their representative or something like that. Once you submit for anything, My Records is going to contain everything that you've applied for. So again, you'll see all of those things there. You'll be able to go back and edit them or make modifications or resubmittals, things like that. The application package, just want to kind of call this out here. So it's 3 sections. The first section is the entity registration, and that's just asking for the ownership information. So you'll provide some information about the owner, and then an entity registration number will be assigned to you. If you have multiple properties under the same ownership, whether it's just you as an individual or as an LLC or a partnership or something like that, once you have that entity registration, you can use that across property applications if they're the same ownership. The licensed establishment is just the property information. So your residential rental property address should be the address there. And then you're going to answer some questions about the residential rental property itself, and that's the license application. One other thing, just want to call out, one of the first questions that the application is going to ask you is your licensed establishment in Denver? And that should always be yes. We do have some licenses that we issue for things outside of Denver, but you're always going to say yes for residential rental property. Again, the licensed establishment is where you're getting the license for. So again, you'll have to provide that inspection checklist and those inspector certification copies. You'll upload those as a part of the application under the residential rental license portion. When we collect that ownership information, you're going to have to provide an ID or an organizational document if you're another entity type. So for an LLC, you'll have to provide an organizational document. This could be something like a certificate of good standing, or articles of incorporation. We have a list of all the organizational document types that are approved, and that does have to be in the exact same name as the entity that you apply under. So let's say you apply as Kyle Malnati LLC. We'll need an organizational document in the name Kyle Malnati LLC. Or again, if it's Nicole Kim Corporation, I would need to provide the document in that exact same name. You do have to provide information for an on-site manager. So this doesn't necessarily have to be someone who is on site or lives on site. This just has to be someone who has access to and authority to make decisions on the property. So this could be someone who's a true on-site manager, in the leasing office or something like that. This could be your property manager. This could be the tenant if they agree. This could be the owner or, someone else, for example, like let's say you have a really helpful uncle who agrees to do this. They can be your on-site manager, but we do need that on-site contact who meets these requirements. We do have a couple of exemptions. So there's a new construction exemption. This is for properties built in the last 4 years, and this is based on the issuance date for the certificate of occupancy or the temporary certificate of occupancy. If it is a temporary, it just needs to be not expired when you apply with it. And again, this is just for new properties, so not change of use or occupancy. Those don't apply. Affordable or public housing properties could also have their application and licensing fees waived if you apply for that exemption. There is also an alternative inspection exemption, and that would be if you have an inspection by a qualifying government agency. So a local, state, or federal agency inspects your properties, and you can apply for that exemption there. Application and license fees here. So there is an application fee that's a one-time fee. It's reduced to $25 right now for single units. Normally it's a $50 fee. And then the license fee is based on the number of dwelling units that you have. So this is a tiered fee structure. It starts at $50 for a single unit, and then it goes up to $100 for 2 to 10 units, and so on and so forth. And then once the license is issued, a couple things here. So the license must be posted. Licenses are valid for 4 years unless ownership changes. So the license is not transferable. New owner does need to get a new license. Any change to the residential rental property, so for example, you add or remove units or ownership changes, again, that's a new license. And then one other thing here too, new for 2023 is that the ordinance requires that the license number be included in advertisements. So I included the format here. It's just going to be the 4-digit year, and then BFN, which is just business file number. That's your record number that's assigned to the application. And then it'll be a 7-digit number after that. So that does have to be posted in all of your advertisements once you have the license. And again, that's once you are renting or offering for rent your residential rental property. We do have an informational bulletin that we encourage folks to sign up for. We share out, tips and reminders, and also if any changes come up in the program. We also have FAQs, which can be really helpful and include a bunch of great information. And those are both on our webpage if you want to stay informed or get more information. And then also just my contact information. And again, you can always email us or contact us at licenses@denvergov.org. That's the best way to get in touch with us. So thanks for your time and listening to this overview here. And I don't know if you have any other questions or if that's going to be included in the next session.
Well, I do have a couple of just brief questions as we wrap up our presentation today, Nicole, or just observations. The first is that I'll share, and it sort of relates to a similar but different item for lots of municipalities, is I've talked to several assessors as it relates to assessing value on property, and then what ends up drilling down into what you get taxed on a regular basis. And most assessors will jokingly say, but it's serious, is that, look, I don't get bonuses if you get charged more. I don't get bonuses if you get fined or any of that sort of discussion. So I think it's important to share that while Nicole is the program manager for this, it's not like she's raking in all of these fees. This is a program that was established by the city council and is something that needs to have compliance. And so I think it's just important to share that Nicole here is a public servant and navigating people through it. So please be patient and please be courteous as you interact with anybody that works for our city and county of Denver. So that's just kind of the first thing that I'd share. And then the second is a question that came up from the crowd of people that we had in our private event last week, but didn't get a chance to get shared with you. And so I'm wondering if there's any sort of documentation or statistical data that can share just approximately how many multifamily owners you think are in compliance at this point. Obviously, the goal is to get to 100%, but do you have a sort of a reference point for how many people are in compliance in the city and county of Denver at this point?
Yes, I looked at those numbers this morning, and I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think that we were at about close to 3,200 licenses issued. So just want to step back to say thank you for the touching on, the fact that, again, I'm just here, bringing forward this information about implementing the license. Related to the fees, just want to also stress that the license is issued for 4 years. The fees were kept, intentionally low. And again, the license is valid for 4 years. So, if you don't have any ownership changes, you're just going to have to conduct those inspections and reapply for a license every 4 years. So really, a consideration there with the fees, that they are very, very low if you break that down, monthly and yearly. Related to the licenses that we've issued so far, 2022 we were considering a voluntary compliance year. And again, this is the largest license expansion in Denver's history. So our next largest license is about, I think, 7,500 licenses we issue for our next largest license program. This one, we're expecting about 54,000. So this is a pretty substantial lift. We know that it's going to take some time to get there. We're focusing on, education and outreach, and obviously things like this, sharing out information through all the channels that we can, and just making sure that people know about the license requirement. Again, I think as of today, we're at about close to 3,200 licenses issued, which we kind of anticipated a number maybe somewhere in that ballpark. Of course, we'd love to wake up tomorrow, and just have 50,000 license applications, but I think it's going to take just a minute to get there. Again, if you're a multi-unit property, you do have to be licensed as of January 1, 2023. If you are a one-unit owner, you have until January 1 of 2024 to be considered, in compliance. Just want to call out again that the application fee is discounted to $25 if you apply in 2023 for single unit owners. If you are a multi-unit owner, that application fee did go back up to the normal $50 at this point.
Thanks for touching on that. The other thing that I think is really important to share as it relates to my industry, which is the brokerage of multifamily properties. We sell single family property as well, but those 2-unit to, in our case, 50 to 60 units is our sweet spot. I believe that these will start becoming more and more common as a contingency within a contract. Nicole doesn't need to, and certainly can't comment on how that should be done, because that's a private contract between a buyer and a seller. But what I'll clarify from our original part of the conversation at the beginning was that the buyer of this property, a 39 unit that I sold in central Denver at the end of last year, they were going to be applying for that landlord license very shortly after closing, once they had a copy of the deed and all of the documentation that they needed to put into the application portal. They just said to the seller, you have to help us with this process by allowing for the landlord licensing inspection to occur while we're under contract. So again, I don't know if people are hearing this and saying like, oh gosh, I now need to get this done before I sell the property. You have to do it no matter what. And then the new buyer is going to end up having to do it shortly after closing. So just sort of a finer point there on that 2-step process if you're in the process of selling. And Nicole, I think that we've done a good job of demonstrating this program. A special cue in to our next episode. Nicole actually fielded several live questions from our audience of Denver multifamily owners that Calibrate Real Estate hosted. And so stay tuned for that content. Nicole, thank you so much for being a part of our Calibrate Real Estate podcast. As I love to say, Nicole, Kim, and we will see you around the neighborhood. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.